Today, I will tell you about the 11 states most likely to face serious power outages in 2025, why this is happening, and importantly, what you can do before you find yourself in the dark, wondering why you weren't prepared.
The
My name
numbers
is
can't be
Zach.
right.
I have been preparing
You have
since
to rerun the
2012, and
projections.
for the last month, I have been analyzing reports on the reliability of power grids, infrastructure assessments, and communicating with insiders from the energy sector, who paint a rather alarming picture. The Ministry of Energy has just released a report warning that the number of outages could increase 100-fold by 2030 if we continue to close reliable power plants without building adequate replacements. This is not some conspiracy theory. Our own government says it. The network is collapsing. But what really caught my attention was that the North American Electric Reliability Corporation had just released its assessment, showing that much of the United States is at increased risk of power shortages. We are not talking about brief interruptions, but about prolonged outages during extreme weather conditions when electricity is needed the most. Before we move on to the states that are in the greatest danger, let me give you an overview of what is happening. Our electrical grid was built in the 60s and 70s for a completely different world. Back then, we had large coal and nuclear power plants that provided stable, predictable energy supply. Today, we close them and replace them with solar panels and wind turbines that only work when nature is favorable. At the same time, we connect millions of electric cars, manage huge data centers for artificial intelligence, and everyone is mining cryptocurrency in their garages. The demand for electricity is rapidly growing while reliable supply is shrinking. This is simple math, and it doesn't add up. Let's start with the 11th place on our list. And it may surprise you. Michigan. Yes, the Great Lakes state is facing the perfect storm of power grid problems that most people do not notice. The industrial base of Michigan is rapidly shifting to electric vehicle production. Ford, GM, Stellantis, all are retrofitting their factories for electric vehicle manufacturing, and these factories consume a massive amount of electricity. We are talking about enterprises that use as much energy as small cities. But here's the catch. Michigan is simultaneously closing coal power plants and one nuclear plant while betting everything on natural gas and renewable energy sources. The problem is that the natural gas infrastructure in Michigan is outdated. Many of these pipelines were laid in the 1950s. When polar vortices occur, which are becoming more frequent, natural gas supplies are limited because everyone needs it for heating. Gas power plants cannot get enough fuel for electricity generation at the moment when demand peaks. I remember how during the polar vortex of 2014, part of Michigan was on the brink of cascading outages. Energy companies were literally calling industrial clients, begging them to halt operations. Michigan also has a unique vulnerability due to the Great Lakes. Ice storms coming from the lakes can coat power lines in layers of ice. In the year 2023, I saw a video where power transmission towers simply collapsed under the weight, as if made of foil. When these long-distance lines fail, entire regions are left without electricity. In winter conditions, repair crews cannot reach the damages for several days. Louisiana ranks 10th, and if you think hurricanes are their only problem, you are missing the bigger picture. Louisiana's power grid is basically held together by duct tape and prayers. The state has one of the oldest energy infrastructures in the country, most of which dates back to the 60s. But Louisiana's real vulnerability lies in its dependence on gas power plants located in flood zones. Louisiana produces a huge amount of natural gas, but most power plants are built right in the hurricane corridor. When storms come, it's not just wind damage. Storm surges can flood entire power generation facilities, and salt water severely damages electrical equipment. After Hurricane Ida, some areas were without electricity for over a month, not because the lines were damaged, but because the power plants themselves were destroyed. The heat and humidity in Louisiana have a brutal impact on equipment year-round. Transformers, substations, all this infrastructure deteriorates faster in such conditions. Energy companies know this, but replacing all this equipment will cost billions they do not have. Therefore, they are constantly engaged in repairs and hope that nothing critical will break down during the peak of summer demand when everyone is running air conditioners around the clock. What particularly worries me in Louisiana is their industrial load. All these oil refineries and chemical plants along the Mississippi require a huge amount of reliable electricity. When the grid becomes unstable, these enterprises are forced to conduct emergency shutdowns, which can take weeks to restore. This creates a cascading effect, where electricity problems lead to a fuel shortage affecting the entire country. By the way, I understand how overwhelming it can be when you try to protect your family, so I prepared a free resource that I use myself. This is a complete guide that shows how to turn just $50 into a food supply for 90 days. I am talking about specific brands, exact quantities, and places to buy everything needed. Plus, I included 37 essential items that most people never think about. The 23rd item on this list is something you probably throw away every week, but it could be incredibly valuable in a power outage situation. The guide also shows dishes that can be prepared without electricity, storage tricks that work even in small apartments, and how to gradually increase your supplies without unnecessary expenses. It's completely free. Just let me know where to send it. The link is in the description below. So, number 9. Here begins the most interesting part. Illinois. Chicago alone consumes more electricity than many entire states. Furthermore, Illinois is actively closing coal power plants without providing adequate replacements. The state relies on wind energy from rural areas. But here is what they do not say. The power lines necessary to deliver this energy to Chicago are completely inadequate. It's like trying to fill a pool through a coffee straw. There is also a serious problem with polar vortices in Illinois. When the temperature drops to -20, the demand for electricity rapidly increases as everyone turns on their heating. But in such conditions, calm weather is often observed, which means wind turbines do not generate electricity. Gas power plants are trying to compensate for the shortage, but the pipelines cannot provide enough fuel in the severe cold. It's a triple failure waiting to happen. I have been monitoring the energy network issues in Illinois since 2018, and I am most concerned about their nuclear plants. These stations provide about half of the state's electricity, but they are old, their maintenance is expensive, and several of them are scheduled for closure. Once these nuclear plants cease operation, Illinois will lose a stable source of energy that supports grid stability. Wind and solar cannot replace this reliability, despite politicians' promises. The cybersecurity threat to Illinois is also significant. Chicago is an important financial center, making it an attractive target for state-sponsored cyber attacks. Its energy infrastructure is becoming increasingly digital and internet-connected. A coordinated cyber attack during a weather event could create chaos that makes the power outage in the Northeast in 2003 seem like a minor inconvenience. Number 8. Massachusetts. New England as a whole has serious problems with its power grid, but Massachusetts is particularly vulnerable. The state has closed nuclear and coal power plants while simultaneously blocking new gas pipelines for environmental reasons. This makes them extremely dependent on liquefied natural gas that comes by sea from abroad. When winter storms disrupt shipping or global prices for liquefied natural gas rise sharply, Massachusetts literally cannot get enough fuel to maintain lighting. The ISO New England network operator has been warning about this for many years. During cold periods, they are often just one step away from a power outage due to a pipeline failure or a delay in the supply of liquefied gas. In the year 2020, they were so close to blackouts that they prepared emergency protocols for rolling power outages by district. Massachusetts also has a unique problem with wind energy from offshore platforms. They are building huge wind farms off the coast of Cape Cod, which sounds great until you realize that the underwater power transmission cables are extremely vulnerable. One ship's anchor snagging the ocean floor can instantly cut off gigawatts of electricity. Maintaining these systems at sea is extremely difficult and expensive, especially during winter storms when this energy is needed the most. The demand side in Massachusetts is also rapidly growing. The state is actively promoting the adoption of electric cars and electric heating systems, replacing oil and gas furnaces. However, they are increasing electric demand without updating the distribution infrastructure. It's like putting a Ferrari engine in a golf cart. Something will definitely break, and the consequences will be catastrophic. New York ranks 7th. And it's not just about New York. Although this city is the biggest vulnerability, the entire state network is on the brink. New York closed the Indian Point nuclear power plant, which supplied a quarter of the city's electricity, replacing it with gas plants and unfulfilled promises of future renewable energy development. The power transmission system connecting the northern part of the state with New York is already operating at its limit. The high-voltage lines running through the Hudson Valley are functioning at maximum capacity during peak demand hours. One serious failure in power transmission, which becomes more likely each year due to aging equipment, could instantly leave millions in the dark. What really worries me about New York is the possibility of cascading failures. The network is so interconnected and operates at the edge of its capabilities that even minor issues can lead to massive outages. Remember the year 2003 when a branch of a tree in Ohio caused a power outage for 50 million people in the Northeast? New York's network is even more vulnerable today, as demand has risen and backup capacity has decreased. There is a frightening situation in New York where extreme heat causes a huge demand for air conditioners, and it is during this time that the ancient underground distribution system is most prone to failures. These underground cables and transformers were not designed for the current loads and literally overheat during hot periods. Con Edison is forced to conduct preventive outages to prevent equipment explosions, leaving tens of thousands of people without electricity at the most inconvenient time. Florida ranks 6th, and the issue is not only with hurricanes, although they are indeed becoming increasingly destructive. The real problem in Florida is the explosive population growth that is unmatched by the capabilities of the infrastructure. The state welcomes about 1,000 new residents daily, each connecting air conditioners, pool pumps, and electric cars. The heat and humidity in Florida severely affect electrical equipment, transformers, substations, and power lines. Everything breaks down faster in such conditions. The salty air from the coast corrodes all metal elements. Energy companies constantly struggle against natural conditions to maintain existing equipment, not to mention the need for upgrades to meet growing demand. Florida's dependence on natural gas is also a serious vulnerability. Most of the electricity in the state is generated at gas stations, and this gas must be delivered through pipelines that pass through hurricane zones. When storms damage these pipelines or the compressor stations supporting the gas flow, power plants cannot operate. This is not just a storm that breaks power lines, it is a whole generation system that is failing. What happened in 2022 with Hurricane Ian really opened my eyes. Even in those places that did not experience direct impact, electricity was lost for weeks because the transmission system could not reroute energy around damaged sections. The network simply does not have enough redundancy. Florida Power and Light is trying to strengthen the system, but they are decades behind the necessary level. The cyber threat to Florida is also significant. The state has numerous military facilities and critical infrastructure, making it a priority target. A coordinated cyber attack during hurricane season can turn a managed natural disaster into a catastrophic network failure that lasts for months. Now, number 5, and it breaks my heart because I love this state, Arizona. The Valley of the Sun can become the Valley of Darkness if they do not resolve their network issues quickly. Phoenix is already one of the hottest cities in America, regularly reaching temperatures of 115 degrees Fahrenheit and above in the summer. But what is insane is that they are adding hundreds of thousands of new residents while water supplies are depleting and the power grid is overloaded. For Arizona, air conditioning is not just an option, but a matter of survival. When the electricity goes out in Phoenix during the summer, people literally die. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and emergency services are struggling. We saw this during the heat waves of 2020 when equipment failures caused power outages. The mortality rate immediately increased. The state heavily relies on the Palo Verde nuclear power plant, the largest in the United States. But here's something no one talks about. Palo Verde needs water for cooling, and it gets it from treated wastewater in Phoenix. If there is a failure in water supply, which becomes more likely each year due to dry conditions, this nuclear power plant will have to reduce its output or shut down completely. Imagine losing 2,000 megawatts of energy at the moment when the temperature reaches 120 degrees. Arizona is also betting heavily on solar energy, which makes sense in the desert, right? But solar panels become less efficient when the temperature rises above 77 degrees. When the temperature reaches 115, these panels may operate at 70% of their efficiency. And, obviously, solar energy does not work at night when people continue to use air conditioners at full capacity. The transmission infrastructure in Arizona is outdated and overloaded. Many major transmission lines were built in the 60s and 70s. They are literally overheating in the sun's heat, deteriorating faster than anywhere else in the country. Utility services understand that they need large-scale upgrades, but the cost will be astronomical, and who will pay for it? Your electricity bills will double or triple. North Carolina ranks 4th. This may surprise those who consider it a stable state, But North Carolina has become the epicenter of several threats to the energy system that are about to collide with each other. The state is actively closing coal power plants, increasingly relying on natural gas and solar energy. However, the problem is that the pipeline capacity in North Carolina is completely insufficient for the growing demands. The Duke Energy Company, which provides most of the electricity in the state, warns that they are on the brink between demand and supply. They are literally one step away from catastrophe. Just one failure in the pipeline or an extreme weather situation could lead to huge shortages. The cyber attack on Colonial Pipeline in 2021 was a troubling signal. If something like this happens to the natural gas infrastructure, North Carolina will face immediate power outages. The state is also experiencing rapid growth in the research triangle around Charlotte. Technology companies, data centers, pharmaceutical manufacturers, all of them are opening their offices and consuming huge amounts of electricity. The infrastructure of the power grids in these areas is not keeping up with the growing demand and is falling behind each year. I am particularly concerned about the threat to physical safety in North Carolina. In 2022, there was an attack on 2 substations in Moore County using rifles, resulting in power outages for 45,000 people for several days. This showed how vulnerable the network is to physical attacks. North Carolina has thousands of substations, most of which are guarded only by chain link fences. A coordinated attack on several critical substations would be enough to disable major cities. Vulnerability to hurricanes in North Carolina is also worsening. The problem is no longer limited to coastal areas. Storms maintain their strength far from the coast, causing catastrophic flooding in places where the infrastructure was not designed for such loads. When substations are flooded, they shut down not just for days, they are destroyed and require complete restoration. Next in line is Texas. And, to be honest, this place could very well take first place. A lonely state manages its own ERCOT network, isolated from the rest of the country. When failures occur in Texas, which happens often, there is no support from neighboring states. They rely entirely on themselves, and this independence becomes a huge problem. Everyone remembers February 2021, when the network completely collapsed during a winter storm. Over 200 people died. Millions were left without electricity for days in freezing weather. Pipes burst, causing billions of dollars in damage. Political disputes after this were grandiose. But what hasn't changed are the main problems that led to this catastrophe. In Texas, deregulated market principles prioritize cheap electricity over reliability. Electric companies make money by cutting costs rather than building sustainable infrastructure. There are no requirements to maintain backup power in case of emergencies. The system is literally designed to operate on the edge between supply and demand. And when something goes wrong, the whole system collapses. Summer months become as dangerous as winter ones in Texas. The state regularly records a record demand for electricity during heat waves. The system operators constantly issue warnings about the need to conserve energy, practically begging people not to use electricity so the network doesn't collapse. This is not a sign of a healthy system. It is a system hanging by a thread. The situation with renewable energy sources in Texas is particularly chaotic. There are huge wind farms in the west of the state, but the transmission lines to deliver this energy to the cities are completely insufficient. When the wind does not blow during peak consumption hours, backup power is insufficient. Gas power plants must compensate for the shortfall, but many are unprepared for extreme conditions. When they are needed most, they fail. What truly frightens me about Texas is the population growth. Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, all these cities are rapidly growing, attracting new residents. The demand for electricity is increasing faster than anywhere else in the country, but infrastructure investments are not keeping pace with this growth. They are building on sandy foundations, and it's only a matter of time before the system collapses again. California is in second place. I understand that everyone expects problems with the electrical grids in California, but the reality is even worse than many imagine. The state has the strictest renewable energy mandates in the country. Reliable power plants are closing, and the focus is on wind and solar energy, supported by batteries that are not yet available. The situation with forest fires has turned California's electrical grid into a weapon. When conditions are dry and windy, energy companies proactively shut off electricity for millions to prevent their equipment from igniting. Think about that. The largest economy in the United States regularly shuts off electricity to avoid disasters. This is a third world level, but it is happening right now in California. Pacific Gas and Electric went bankrupt after its equipment caused fires that claimed dozens of lives and destroyed entire cities. Now they are so afraid of liability that they cut off electricity at the first signs of wind. These are not temporary outages. People are left without electricity for several days, and this becomes the norm. California residents are asked to simply accept that the grid fails when it is needed most. The state's renewable energy has created a crazy situation called the duck. During the day, they generate so much solar energy that sometimes they have to pay other states to accept it. But when the sun sets and everyone returns from work, the demand sharply increases, while solar energy production drops to zero. Networks have to quickly switch to other sources, leading to equipment overload and increased risk of breakdowns. California also forces everyone to switch to electricity. Electric cars, electric stoves, electric heating. Everything is electric. They ban gas appliances while acknowledging that the grid cannot handle the current demand. It's just madness. They demand increased electricity consumption while making its supply less reliable. California's electricity transmission system is outdated and overloaded. Many main power lines were built 60 years ago. They pass through mountains, deserts, and forests, exposed to all possible threats. Modernizing these lines will take decades and require hundreds of billions of dollars. No one wants to pay for this, so they continue to patch problems and hope for the best. Water is also becoming a serious issue for California's energy grid. Hydroelectric energy, which previously provided stable base production, is becoming unreliable due to the depletion of reservoirs. In some years, hydroelectric production decreases by 50% or more. This power needs to be replaced with gas power plants, but California is closing them down. It's a vicious cycle created by its own efforts. Currently, California is a state that will likely face serious power outages in 2025. In fact, this is a rivalry between Texas and California, as both states strive for the collapse of their networks. However, I prefer California, as at least Texas is trying to develop new capacities. California is actively destroying its reliable energy sources against the backdrop of rising demand. But what no one talks about is that the main threat is not in any one state. It is the interconnected nature of our power grid, which means that failures can cascade across entire regions. Food security becomes critically important during prolonged outages. When the electricity goes out, stores empty within hours, supply chains break down, and credit card terminals stop working. That's why I prepared the free guide I mentioned earlier. It shows how to create a food supply for 90 days for just $50, listing specific items, where to buy them, and how to store them properly. This is the same method I use for my family. Water is even more critical than food. Municipal water supply systems require electricity to operate pumps and treatment facilities. When the network fails, water pressure drops, and there is a risk of contamination. Store at least 1 gallon of water per person per day for at least 2 weeks. It is best to acquire a quality water filter that does not require electricity. Medical preparedness is often ignored, but it is vital. If you need medications that require refrigeration, you must have a backup plan. If you use medical devices that require electricity, you need spare batteries or a generator. Hospitals will be overwhelmed during major outages, so you need to be able to handle minor medical issues on your own. Communication becomes critically important when the network goes down. Cell towers have a limited backup power source, usually only for a few hours. Equip yourself with a battery-powered radio or hand generator to receive information in emergencies. Consider using amateur radio for two-way communication. Have a communication plan with family members when phones are down. Financial preparedness implies having cash on hand. When the electricity goes out, ATMs don't work, credit card terminals are dead, and banks may be closed. Having enough cash to cover expenses for 2 weeks can be the deciding factor between getting what you need and not having it. The resilience of a community significantly enhances individual preparedness. Make sure to get to know your neighbors before disaster strikes. Share knowledge, resources, and support. A prepared community is much more resilient than isolated individuals. Consider creating or joining a local preparedness group. Physical safety becomes important during prolonged power outages. When the lights go out for days, desperate people may resort to extreme measures. Ensure your home is secure. Have a plan to protect your family and supplies. This is not about paranoia, but about reality. Look at what happened in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Stay informed, but think critically. Government bodies and municipal services often downplay the vulnerabilities of the energy system to prevent panic, but they can also exaggerate their preparedness and response capabilities. A variety of information sources will give you a more complete understanding of reality. Master skills that do not require electricity. Cooking without electricity, purifying water, basic medical assistance, preserving food, these skills become invaluable during prolonged outages. Your knowledge and skills are the only things that cannot be taken away. Have a plan for extreme temperatures. During outages, more people die from extreme heat and cold than from any other cause. If you live in a hot climate, identify the coolest room in your house and have battery-operated fans. In cold regions, ensure safe backup heating and a supply of blankets. Write important information on paper. When phones and computers fail, you need physical copies of important phone numbers, medical information, insurance policies, and emergency plans. Old paper backups can save your life. Consider alternative places. If there is a prolonged outage in your area, could you temporarily relocate? Having friends or relatives in other regions gives you options, but plan ahead, not when everyone else is trying to leave. Practice your preparations. Spend a practical weekend without electricity with your family. Turn off the main circuit breaker and see how well your plans work. You will quickly identify the shortcomings in your preparations that can be fixed now, rather than discovering them during an actual emergency. Stay in shape. This may seem unrelated, but when the elevators don't work, when you carry water, when you have to do without modern conveniences, physical fitness becomes critical. The energy system makes us dependent. Outages remind us that physical ability matters. Mental preparation is as important as physical resources. Prolonged outages can be psychologically heavy. Boredom, anxiety, uncertainty, all of this affects the psyche. Have books, games, and activities that do not require electricity. Maintain routines for stability. Keep cars with full tanks. Gas stations require electricity. When the grid fails, gas stations close. Never let the fuel level drop below half a tank. Consider safely storing extra fuel if possible. Your vehicle may become the only source of energy in case of an emergency. Keep in mind that the response from government services will be insufficient. FEMA, the National Guard, local emergency services. All will be overwhelmed during serious power grid failures. They may not appear for days or even weeks. You need to become your own first responder. Consider the special needs of all your family members. Babies, elderly people, disabled individuals, and pets each have unique needs during a power outage. Baby formula, medications, mobility aids, pet food. Plan for everyone's needs, not just adults. Think about your job and income. Can you work without electricity? Will you get paid if your workplace closes for several weeks? Having savings and alternative sources of income will protect you during prolonged disruptions. Study the experiences of other countries. Places like South Africa, Lebanon, and Puerto Rico regularly face power outages. Learn what works for them and adapt their strategies to your situation. Many Americans believe that we are shielded from third world problems, but our power grid proves otherwise. Bias towards normality is your enemy. People assume that tomorrow will be just like today, that someone else will solve the problems, that everything isn't so bad. Such thinking leads to tragedies during disasters. Consider that great changes are already approaching and prepare for them. Here is the harsh truth. Our electrical grid is a 20th century system trying to meet the needs of the 21st century, facing unprecedented threats. It will not hold. The question is, will you be ready when the failure occurs? The states I mentioned are just the tip of the iceberg. Every state faces vulnerabilities in its power grid. Some are simply closer to the critical point than others. But when cascading failures begin, geographical borders will not matter. This is a national crisis requiring individual preparation, as no national solutions are anticipated. I have been preparing since 2012, and I have never been as worried about the reliability of the power grid as I am now. Convergence of threats, acceleration of problems, lack of serious solutions. All this indicates major disruptions in the near future. This is not intimidation, it's pattern recognition. But here's the hopeful part. Every step you take to prepare makes you more resilient. Every new skill, every resource, every plan reduces your vulnerability. You can't fix the power grid, but you can prepare for its failure. Start small if necessary. Even basic preparation is better than nothing, but start now. Don't wait for the first major blackout to signal your action. By then, it will be too late. The time to prepare is when the light is still on. The more people prepare, the more resilient our communities will become. If this information was useful to you, don't forget to rate it. And remember, you have the opportunity to get a free guide that details how to stock up on food for 90 days for just $50. This guide contains all the necessary information about storing food in emergencies, as well as a list of 37 items that most people don't even realize they should stock up on. In case of a power outage, this knowledge could save your family. The situation with electricity supply may become critical, and this is not pessimism but reality based on existing facts. The only question is whether you will be ready when it happens. The choice is yours. It's time to act now. Be ready, stay safe, and remember that the light will not always shine, but you can always be prepared. Thank you for your attention. My name is Zach, and see you in the next episode.